And hello and welcome back to another video now in Node.js, right? So, because yesterday I was looking at Apollo, which is this industry standard of, sorry. So Apollo is the industry standard of GraphQL implementations providing a data graph layer that connect mother apps to the cloud, right? So if you want to deep dive into some more advanced stuff tools that they provide, and if you really want to commit to their platform that help you build GraphQL projects as a part of a much larger team, uh, such as Apollo Federation, Apollo Studio, and Rover CLI. So most of the time, we're going to use a Apollo server, the Apollo client, right? So the Apollo client is this set of front-end libraries that help to make GraphQL queries and save the data from in the front end. So using Apollo is much more convenient than making HTTP post requests to a GraphQL endpoint directly. So it lets you, this client, it lets you to GraphQL query this set of front-end libraries allows you to query GraphQL server much like you will in graphical. It also comes with other benefits like catching queries, handling network operations and errors, and keeping the data synced with the server. This is the four main things that you can do according to the zero to master structure, Adam, when he mentioned about Apollo client. Okay, if I go to Apollo client here, Apollo client here, exactly, from their website. So it's free forever. What is Apollo client? The cloud is data fetching, reactive data catch, excellent dev experience, designed for modern UIs, and community driven. So the Apollo client is driven by the community, right? And they also show you the pricing for that. If you're gonna start here, preview serverless, everything you need to get on your super graph. But this is for GraphQL, for Graph OS planned for any scale. Get peak supercharged performance with dedicated infrastructure and advanced control. Dedicated infrastructure with SLA, custom routing, configuration, router scripting, CPU memory customization, limited TPS. Complete cloud-native supergraph plan for much modular graph development, advanced query capability, and embedded. So okay, no, but this is for the Graph OS. This is another thing. But what I'm looking right now, serverless, dedicated, enterprise. But what I'm looking right now is that the Apollo client is free, okay? And if you look at it, read the docs, and again, I will argue that most of the time a client provides you a set of functions like checking the loading status and error, catching, and keep the data in sync with the server. So most of the time, I will think that this is the three main key features. Okay, so introduction to Apollo Client. Apollo Client is a comprehensive state management library for JavaScript that enables you to manage both local and remote data with GraphQL. Okay, use it to fetch, catch, and modify applications data, all while automatically updating your UI. So a state management library for JavaScript. This is somewhat similar to Redux. You know, a state management library, right? And this state management library, let me going to keep reading here. Use it to fetch, catch, and modify application data while automatically updating your UI. This is kind of the same thing but again, this is a state management library. Okay, Apollo Client helps you to structure your code in an economical, predictable, and declarative way that is consistent with modern development practice. The core of Apollo Client's library provides built-in integration with React, and the larger Apollo community maintains integration from other popular view layers. It's the community that maintains this. Ooh, okay. Integration is maintained by Guillermo Chow. You see the repo. VBS Apollo. Okay, it's maintained by this, but this is for what? For documentation for View 3 and View 2. View Apollo. Oh, this is maintained by. Okay, okay, interesting. Okay, interesting. Support GraphQL 16 and GraphQL and Apollo Client 3. No support for GraphQL. Use lazy query to load catch twice API and enhancement. Mm, penetrate v4 upstream type security. Error in create her type error. This network interface description is not a function. Subscribe is not a function. I know when using polling turtle. Apollo subscribe to more. Apollo subscription to more. GraphQL error ignore when using polling turtle. When resolved, call only once when same query using two components. Mm. Okay, no, but looking inside their issues. Okay, okay, but this is for view two. And for view three, we got is this compatibility. View three and Apollo client. This library integrates Apollo, this industry standard of implementing GraphQL, providing the data layer graph to connect mother apps to the cloud in your view component with declarative queries. So go to installation. Okay, all right. It'll be create the link, and catch implementation. Create a follow client. Visual Studio Code with the integration of that GraphQL website and the next steps. Mm, Since Apollo client here, okay, so go back to what is Apollo, all right? Uh, since Apollo client, where you, come on, since Apollo client is a set of library according to Adam, the zero to master instruction. So Apollo client is a set of front-end library that help make GraphQL queries and save data in your frontend. Using Apollo is much more convenient than making an HTTP post request on your GraphQL server directly. So it lets you query your it lets you query your GraphQL server much like you will in graphical. That's one of the great things that allows with Apollo client. Okay, the client that provide with this set of front end tools, it allows you to query a GraphQL server much like you will in a graphical. Okay, so much like you will in a graphical. Mhm. So much like you will in a graphical. All right. Yeah, much like you will in a graphical. Much like you will in a graphical, and it comes with but it comes with added benefit. Catching queries, handling loading and error states, and keep data sync with your server. Okay, okay. Mhm. So this is Apollo client. This is state management library. All right. So I know are the benefits of using GraphQL, especially here, because well, it depends on your use case. GraphQL solves problems like overfetching and underfetching, aka for salespeople, it's like, well, it will improve the page load time, so it will decrease the page load time and the the user response time. So it will decrease the page load time and reduce it will increase it will increase or it will decrease the page load time. Yeah, it will decrease the page load time, meaning more users. Uh, yeah, it will decrease page load time with the overfetching and underfetching. Improve the performance of your application, so users are now able to interact with your app much more faster, and which leads to the which leads to user retention and increase the user conversion, user retention, user conversion. So that's the narrative behind that. Okay, so okay, you have is the technical side. Okay, and what is the end goal of this technical side? All right, is to have more user conventions through these user retention because now they are much more because now your app is more performant. Because now your app is more performant anytime you ask for data. Anytime you want to look, for example, in a product catalog. Okay. It will increase the user retention and the probably the user conversion. Okay. Okay. Features: declarative data fetching, excellent developer experience, designed for modern React, incrementally adaptable, drop a poll into any JavaScript app and incorporate feature by feature, universally comparable, use any build setup or and any GraphQL API, community driven, share knowledge with thousands of developers in the GraphQL community, and recommended docs. After you started, we recommend the following is the query and mutation from their own section, catching or review. Apollo clients normalize catch able to skip network requests and title when data is already available locally. Managing local states, Apollo client provide an API for managing both remote and local data, enabling you to consolidate all of your application state. Base HTTP network, learn how to use, learn how to send custom headers and other authentication metadata in your queries, and testing React components. Test your GraphQL operations without requiring a connection to a server. Mm, okay, 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 okay. So after all, Apollo Client is a state management library that enables you to manage both local and remote data with GraphQL because they're hugely mhm, because they're hugely conveying to that. Because they're hugely conveying to that. Mm, interesting. Very, very, very interesting. Okay. So blockchain helps you structure code in an economical, predictable, and declarative way that is consistently with modern development practice. The core Apollo client provides built-in integration with React and a larger Apollo community maintains integration for popular views and layers. So understand what is Apollo, all right, from a broad perspective, makes you starting to make sense. What are we going? So why are we using it, and how can I use it? For example, with frameworks that I am familiar with, like Vue. Okay, okay. So that is Apollo. Okay, it's a state management library for JavaScript that enables you to manage both local and remote GraphQL, much like you and allows you to perform queries, much like you will in a graphical. This is an important thing here. So Apollo clients allow you to perform GraphQL query much like you will in a graphical graphical, and also with other benefits like catching data, uh, load, so catching data, handling loading states and errors, and keeping your data synced with the server. So that is Apollo client. Okay. And then I look at the Apollo server. So the Apollo server. The Apollo server. Okay. So they tell me is that it allows you to create GraphQL server in Node, very much like a GraphQL package. Even better, it helps you to run and deploy your server code to serverless environment like Lambda. Okay, this is one of the big benefits of using Apollo server. It helps you to run and deploy your server code to a serverless environment like Lambda. It includes functionality to help you implement subscription in your server, another root level operation. So where subscriptions allows you to push data from the server to subscriber client, much like push notification in the phone. Okay, okay. So here it comes with a lot of jargon, mumbo jumbo. Apollo server is an open source spec compliant GraphQL server that's compatible with a basic GraphQL client. So all of this is to say Apollo server is open source. It followed the GraphQL server spec and is compatible with GraphQL client, including Apollo client. And that's compatible with any GraphQL client, including Apollo client. Okay, it is the best way to build a production-ready, self-documented GraphQL API that can use data from any source. Because so far I see how I can create an Apollo server, okay, but not an Apollo client. Most of the operation or the query with it comes from the graphical. All right. Alright, okay, so that's what Apollo server allows to do. It's the best way to build production-ready, self-documented GraphQL API that can use data from any source. Because after all, Apollo is this industry standard of GraphQL implementations. The providing the data access graph for communicate modern web apps to the cloud. Okay. Or to connect or to communicate to connect modern apps to the cloud. Okay. Interesting. So you are the uh, okay. You're one of the maintainers of this. And they're using Mastodon. Holy wow. Okay. Radical. I'm from a friend. And then even elementary. Alright. Battle. Creator of ESLint. What? Consulting coach and author. What? Most mostly offline until December 26th. Wait, what? A year? Interesting. And now we are mastering. Interesting, interesting. Okay. Hmm. Interesting. Mm. Stand for graphical user interface for JavaScript project. Ah, okay. Mentality for multi-platform deployment. Ah, wow. Build on Rust. Wow. Theory. Build and optimize secure and front-end independent applications for multi-platform deployment. Mm, okay. Mhm. But in any case, no, because this is what happened with the with software, you know. So cut the fluff, man. Cut the fluff. Cut the fluff. So we are here. Understanding is what Apollo client is, right? So that makes a lot of sense. Okay. Well, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Just a quick pause here. Okay. So now that I know what Apollo client is, okay, which is a set of which is a set of front-end package that allow us to build GraphQL query and to save data rather than doing from scratch as an HTTP post request. Hit as an HTTP post request to hit a GraphQL endpoint. So this allows us to graph. Okay, so this allows to make GraphQL queries much like you would in a graphical. Okay, so much like you would in a graphical, and it also comes with added benefits like catching data, uh, handling loading and error states, and keep your data synced with the server. Okay. Son. All right. Okay, so that is the Apollo client. It's a state management library. Use it to fetch, catch, and modify applications data while automatically updating your view. Mhm. Okay. 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 I would like to see this in real action. You know, I would like to see this in real action. Okay. And then I look at the Apollo server. Okay. So the Apollo server allow me to create GraphQL server in a node very much like with GraphQL package, and even better. Okay. And even better. it helps you to run, or it helps me to run and deploy your server code in a serverless environment like Lambda, okay, like Lambda or Azure or from Google, and it includes functionality to help you implement subscription, which is a root level operation in GraphQL server, where subscriptions allow you to send or allow you to push data from the server to subscribe clients, much like push notification in your phone. An Apollo server wraps all of this functionality in your GraphQL server and exposes it individually as a set of npm package. So Apollo server wraps all of these features and exposes individually as an npm package. And expose is Apollo server includes two built-in integrations: Star standalone server and Express middleware. The Star standalone server functions set useful defaults to get you started quickly. Under the hood, the Star standalone server function use Apollo server for Express integration. Express middleware. The Express middleware function is Apollo server for Express integration. So it comes, the larger community maintains the following open source integration for Apollo server. Okay. Allows you to run your server code. This allows you to run and deploy your server code. Okay. This allows you to run and deploy your server code in a serverless environment. Okay. And it comes with this npm package, and also to uh, implement subscription in your server, where subscriptions are a root level operation that push data to subscribe event, to subscribe client. Apollo server integration. For those building an integration library app. So, and you look at Apollo server include, this is part of the integration here. Apollo server includes two built integration: Star standalone server and Express middleware. Star standalone server and Express middleware. And that's what is the beauty of Express. Is that Express not only allows us to avoid to set up our routes by foot, okay, but also allows to create web server scalable and add new features while adding new features. This is one of those features, right? Okay, okay. So you have Apollo server version 4 and Apollo client version 3. Okay, okay. Okay, all right. In server, text node, router. Interesting. Apollo server and Apollo client. Okay, okay. So now I'm going to look at the next model. here. Okay, which is exactly. So it's building an Apollo server with Node.js.
Create a fully functional Apollo server. The Apollo Express NPM package that we see in front of us is the most widely used way of using Apollo with Node. It allows us to combine Apollo with an existing Express server to...
What is the beauty? I'm going to make a pause here. What is the beauty of this? To recap the concept of middleware is that with middleware, which are functions that allow us to work with the incoming request and the response coming out of the server, that's one of the beauty of Express, or the concept of software development. Okay, that the middleware, the more middleware you add, the more functionality you can provide in a server. Okay, again, there is a trade-off of how much capability you can provide in a server.
take advantage of the best of both worlds. Now, here's a fun question. Can we convert our existing GraphQL server to Apollo Server Express without too much effort? You might be surprised. Let's dive in and see exactly what it takes. First things first, we're going to uninstall the Express GraphQL library, which we're going to be replacing with Apollo. So in our terminal, we'll do npm uninstall express-graphql. Now we need to replace that with our Apollo Server Express package. So I'll clear the terminal and npm install apollo-server-express.
We need to install that Apollo Server Express because of the version we're using here. And I think this is deprecated. Yeah, I'm not surprised on that. The Apollo Server package is part of the Apollo Server 2 and 3, which are now deprecated. End of life October 22, 23. This package functionality is now found in the Apollo Server package. See Apollo Graph for more info. An Apollo server. Published 3 months ago. Apollo server, which is this.
Our packages are now where they should be. We can go back into the code and remove our Express GraphQL middleware that allowed us to respond to GraphQL requests in an Express server using the GraphQL HTTP function. So we're going to remove that and replace it with an import of our Apollo Server Express library. This module exports something called the Apollo server, which is going to handle all of our incoming requests, whether they're for GraphQL or another Express middleware in our server. So how do we use this Apollo server anyway? Well, the convention with Apollo is to use a function that we'll define right here above make executable schema that we'll call start Apollo server. You'll see this in most Apollo projects. Just like every Express server, we're going to initialize our application, calling that Express function. We're also going to make use of our GraphQL tools make executable schema function which is fully compatible with Express GraphQL and Apollo. So we'll move that into our start Apollo function. Let's remove some of this white space here. And we'll also remove this /GraphQL route with our old Express GraphQL middleware that we're no longer using. But if we got rid of the GraphQL endpoint, we need to replace it with something that Apollo provides for us. This is where our Apollo server comes in. We'll create a new Apollo server instance, which will take in some options. We'll see that in just a moment. And we'll assign this to a server constant. This Apollo server object contains all the middleware and logic to handle incoming GraphQL requests. What we're trying to achieve is to make our executable schema with our type definitions and our resolvers. We want this schema to define how our Apollo server responds to GraphQL requests. The way we do that is by passing in the schema object as an option to Apollo server. And Apollo server accepts the schema made by makeExecutable schema from the GraphQL tools library. Apollo and GraphQL tools work so well together because GraphQL tools was originally written by one of the Apollo developers, which makes it much easier to transform projects that use GraphQL tools into Apollo projects if you want to. It's really powerful stuff that we're about to experience. So let's keep going. Because we were already using makeExecutable schema, we can pass that directly into our Apollo server. And we can use this shorthand syntax to make things even cleaner. Now, one reason why we use this start Apollo server function, this is so that we can call await on server.start. This will tell Apollo to prepare to handle incoming GraphQL operations. With Apollo server ready, we can now call server.apply middleware, which connects Apollo's GraphQL middleware with our Express server. We have to tell the function which Express application to connect to by passing in the app object, and we can optionally choose a custom path to handle our GraphQL requests. By default, this is /GraphQL, but we can change this to anything we like. This apply middleware function is basically calling app.use on the middleware that is created inside of our Apollo server, and then mounting that on the path that we specify. It's just a convenience function for exactly that. Finally, we start listening for HTTP requests, whether they're GraphQL requests or other requests that will be handled by Express, by calling app.listen inside of our Apollo server function. So let's move that right underneath where we apply the middleware. And that's basically it. Of course, we have to call our start Apollo server function, so let's do that right below where it's defined. Will this work? Let's see Apollo server in action. In our terminal, we'll clear the console and npm start. The server seems to be running, so let's load our browser and see what we get under the /GraphQL endpoint. Apollo server is on port 3000 under /GraphQL, so let's load it. Hey, okay, wait a second. What's this? This isn't quite graphical. Let's see. We'll check this automatically redirects me to Studio and select Query Your Server. Let's see what happens. We're taken to this Apollo Sandbox tool. This is an Apollo front-end application that is much like graphical, but is built specifically for Apollo. We can query our fresh Apollo server in this operations box exactly the same as when we used Express GraphQL. Notice that this Apollo Sandbox has pre-populated our query, which is showing us an added feature of GraphQL that we haven't yet discussed. We can name our queries and mutations by adding a name after the type of the operation and before the object, which contains the fields from the response that we're interested in. We could name this anything we like, say funny query, and we can execute it to get the response just like we would with graphical. Notice we're getting the orders and listing our single orders date and listing all of the product IDs. Apollo Sandbox has even more features than graphical. Notice that we're getting the HTTP status code, how long the request took, and even how large the response is in bytes. It's almost like a fully featured Postman specific for GraphQL. And just like graphical, we can explore our documentation here on the left, listing all of the queries. And if we go back or click on the root, we can also see our mutations. To add a new product, we can click on one of these fields to list all possible arguments and fields in the response, using that as a reference when writing a mutation. For example, we can add a mutation, and if we give it a name, like funny mutation, we'll be able to select whether we want to send the mutation or the funny query to our server. Naming our operations lets us pick and choose which one to execute at any point in time. As an example, let's add a new product inside of our funny mutation here. We'll add new product, passing in an ID, which will make yellow jacket, a description, sunny jacket, and a price, which we'll say is $90.88. We'll pick from the result the description of our new product. Notice that now, the execute button or the submit operation button here will execute only this mutation. We've added our sunny jacket, and now if we click on funny query and submit that, we're getting 3 products and all of our latest changes. Just a quick sample of what we can do with Apollo. See, that wasn't too large of an effort, was it? All the steps that we've taken to modularize our GraphQL server made it easy to migrate from Express GraphQL to Apollo server. We could now explore more Apollo-specific features and combine them with what we've already built. We could integrate with an Apollo frontend. We could add more specific database features or implement subscriptions. The possibilities are endless. Our GraphQL journey is just beginning. But we've done all of the hard work. Our GraphQL fundamentals are now in place. And that's what I'll leave you with. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.
Server plugin drain HTTP server, and the HTTP server you create from your app with Express app. Interesting. Okay, okay. Very interesting. Because on this video, even though that most of this library, for example, Apollo Server Express is just deprecated, right? But the whole idea here is to understand that what is GraphQL, what is Apollo client, what is Apollo, what is Apollo client, what is Apollo server, and how you can implement Apollo server in an existing Express application, like what we did here with the GraphQL npm package. So the implementation details may vary, okay, but the core remains. So what you're doing is just inject your Apollo instance into the Express, or as an Express middleware. So this will detect is incoming GraphQL server, incoming GraphQL queries, mutation or subscriptions, GraphQL operations. Okay. So, to recap, Apollo is an industry standard of GraphQL implementation, providing a data graph layer to connect mother web or mother apps to the cloud, right? So if you want to dive deep into some advanced tools that they provide you to create more, or to create projects, to create GraphQL projects with a much more, as a part of a much larger team, you can rely on all of those tools like, they mentioned like Federation, CLI Rover, thing like that, right? Now, then I look at what is GraphQL, or what is Apollo client and Apollo server. And Apollo client is a set of front-end libraries that allow you to make GraphQL query and save the data instead of making HTTP post request to a GraphQL endpoint, where this package allows us to define GraphQL query much like in a graphical and provide some other benefits like catching, handling loading and error states, and keep data in sync. Cool. And then I look at the Apollo server, which allows you to create a GraphQL server in Node, much like you would do with the GraphQL package, but with some benefits like run and deploy your server code to a serverless environment such as Lambda, and to implement subscription, which is another root level operation for a GraphQL server that it works by pushing data from the server to subscribe client, much like the push notification, right? So knowing that, and then I look at how you can implement this integration with an existing Express app, all right? In this case, yes, it's deprecated, right? But they also provide you is way of how you can integrate with your Express applications, and also more dive deep in like transition preserver plugin. All right, this is well to gracefully exit your. This is to ensure your server gracefully shut down. Okay, so now it's going look at the HTTP model from the node. All right. Okay. Okay. So that'll be all for this video. Take care. Bye bye.